Hey, what's up everybody? Jake here and welcome to the hobby. Can you believe it's already the end of 2024? I thought this was actually a fantastic year to be a Pokemon card collector and a great time to start collecting Pokemon cards too. There were tons of really affordable and cheap cards, and if you made some right choices, you could have doubled or tripled the value of your collection for all I know. And honestly, if you wanted to collect something, most of it was readily available. There were some stuff that were sold out. As always, there's going to be popular products, but in general, we had a really solid year. So I'm going to count down the top 20 most expensive and highly desirable cards to collect from the modern era. These are going to include cards from the last 4 years, and it's only going to include set cards, which are cards that you can actually pull inside of booster packs. I didn't think it made sense to throw in promo cards that were exclusive or one-of-ones, because obviously those are going to be very expensive, but if you and I can't collect them, it doesn't really make sense to keep track of it. So let's talk about the most expensive and highly desirable modern chase cards that are available in your everyday booster packs. Just a quick heads up, all of the data from today's video was from the Collector app, and the Collector app is also the sponsor of today's video. If you want to digitize your collection, track all of your Pokemon cards, see the value of your cards, know the population report on your cards, or just any kind of information on your cards at all, try out the Collector app. They have been a huge partner for our channel, and I love using their app. I've been using them for a very long time. It is an app made by collectors for collectors. You can check it out, scan your Pokemon cards, add them to your collection, and showcase your collection to other collectors globally. You can also follow other people's collections. You can see my collection, you can see my whole entire showcase, and you can also check out their social media platform, which is directly on the app. I can see that Pat Flynn from Deep Pocket Monster has recently added some Gengar cards to his collection, and I can comment on that. I can let Pat know that I think those cards are awesome, that he's adding them to his collection. So check out the Collector app. A super easy way to scan your cards, see the value of them, check out the population report, and see how much the value of your cards are. Or you can just add cards to your watch list and see if certain cards might be affordable down the line for you to finally scoop up. Check out the Collector app, and thank you again to Collector for sponsoring today's video. Like I said, all the data from today's video was collected from the Collector app directly, and this is going to be their data. And on the 20th spot for the most expensive card from the modern era, we have ourselves the Charizard V from Brilliant Stars. Its starting price in 2023 was $222, and it is currently going for $315, which is a 42% price jump from last year to this year. The population report shows that there are 10,500 copies of this Charizard V. This is super common. It seems like most modern era set cards, the most highly desirable chase ones, there's usually around 6,000 to 10,000 copies of them. And you'll see there are some cards where there are more than 10,000 PSA 10 copies of these cards. PSA 10 graded copies, not just raw ungraded copies, which there are even more copies of, but it really goes to show you how robust the market is when there are 10,000 Charizard V alt art cards from Brilliant Stars, and it's still garnering a price of $300. And remember, $300 is the starting point, the 20th graded cards on this list. Back in the day, when I say back in the day, I mean like 6 to 8 years ago, you never saw a card reaching even the price point of $100 to $200, even for a PSA 10. And nowadays, $300 is the starting point, which is really, really wild. And in 19th place, we got ourselves a second Charizard card, which is the Charizard EX from Obsidian Flames. This was actually really surprising to me. The Obsidian Flames Charizard is currently going for $330, although it started off this year at $356, so it's actually gone down a little bit, which is very surprising. I wasn't actually expecting to see any card from Obsidian Flames even on this list, but I'm happy to see it on the list because it shows case that even sets like Obsidian Flames, there are still some really awesome chase cards. So one thing I learned from this specific list is you never underestimate the power of Charizard. Obviously, I'm not a Charizard collector, but I'm not that surprised that there are so many Charizards on this list. There are 8,981 copies of the Charizard EX as well. In 18th place, we got ourselves our first Evolving Skies card, and it won't be our last. We have 4 Evolving Skies cards on this list. Guess you guys can figure out which ones those are. The first one on the list is going to be the Glaceon VMAX, which started off this year at $200 and is now currently going for $340, which is a 70% price jump. Very, very solid. There are 6,400 copies of it in a PSA 10, so it's a little bit harder to find this card than other cards in a PSA 10. I would actually look at some of the cards with the lower population reports, and I would say those cards have the potential to jump up a little bit. Just depends. There's supply and demand, but demand is much harder to gauge because you don't really know how many people want a specific card out there, but supply is much easier to track. In 17th place, we got ourselves the Leafeon VMAX, almost the exact same price as the Glaceon. I could almost flip these two. The Leafeon VMAX started off this year at $210 and it's currently going for $358. It is just a little bit more desirable than the Glaceon VMAX, which I think is very fair. And it is currently showing 6,646 PSA 10 copies. So pretty much the exact same amount of PSA 10 copies as the Glaceon, which makes sense. If you're going to grade your Glaceon alt art, you're probably going to grade your Leafeon alt art as well. And in 16th place, we got ourselves another Evolution card, but this one is not from Evolving Skies. It's actually from Fusion Strike, and it's actually my favorite Evolution from the alt art series, the VMAX one at least, and that is going to be the Espeon VMAX, starting off this year at $224 and ending this year at $374. A little bit lower in terms of a price jump than the Leafeon and the Glaceon, but I'm not complaining. It's a super cool card. I have it inside of my collection. I think it looks absolutely amazing, and there are 6,988 PSA 10 copies, so it's still a ton of copies out there. They are readily available if you want any of these cards. You can technically pick them up, but you are paying a premium. These cards are going for around $400 nowadays. Next up, we got ourselves a Lugia card, and can you guess which one it is? In 15th place, we got ourselves the Lugia V from Silver Tempest. It is currently going for around $400, and it started off this year at $287, which is a 40% price jump. I would say the most interesting thing about this data is the amount of PSA 10 copies of this Lugia V, which is a little worrying. There are 11,869 PSA 10 copies, and obviously these numbers are constantly being updated. In a month or two, this number could reach over 12,000 PSA 10 copies of this Lugia V. Incredibly popular. It is one of the most heavily graded card on this whole entire list, and there are a lot of PSA 10 copies of it. Just goes to showcase you how popular the Lugia is. Incredibly high price, even for the amount of PSA 10 copies there are. And in 14th place, we got ourselves a little bit of an underdog card. Can you guys guess what it is? In 14th place, we got ourselves the Blaziken VMAX from Chilling Reign, starting off this year at $195, and it is currently going for $420, $420, and it is showing a price change of 115% from last year to this year. An incredibly underrated card. You either love this card or you hate it, and if you don't like this card, there's nothing convincing you that it's good. So it's going to be completely dependent on you whether you like this card or not. There are currently 3,858 PSA 10 copy, which actually explains why there was such a large price jump for the Blaziken VMAX, because when the population is low and a card gets very popular, there's just not enough supply to keep up with the demand. So that's why it saw a significant price jump compared to some other cards, because there just aren't that many PSA 10 graded copy of this Blaziken VMAX. I do think it's absolutely adorable. I was able to pull one from my Chilling Reign pack opening from way back when, so I'm happy to have it inside of my collection. Next up, we got ourselves our third Charizard card on the list. Can you guys see a little bit of pattern? As I go through this list, you're going to see some patterns start popping up. In 13th place, we got ourselves the Charizard EX from Paldean Fates. Started off this year at $200, and it's currently going for also $420, a second 420, and that shows a price jump of 110%. There are currently 6,600 PSA 10 copy of this card. I know a lot of people were scoffing at Paldean Fates, but based on the data, I would actually say Paldean Fates is one of the best Scarlet and Violet era Pokemon card set. Do not ignore Paldean Fates. If you have something inside your collection, try to keep a sealed Paldean Fates ETB at the minimum. Just one Paldean Fates sealed ETB. It's not going to kill you. I usually don't make recommendation, but this is a very easy one to keep sealed. And you're going to want to have something of Paldean Fates sealed because this set is kind of underrated. No one ever talks about it, but there's some cool cards inside of it. Obviously, the Charizard EX is a big one. And in 12th place, we got ourselves our first Surging Sparks card. I would say this is a little bit controversial because there aren't a ton of cards that are graded from Surging Sparks yet, and usually when the population is new, when there's a fresh grade going around, usually the graded cards are very expensive. But as of right now, this tracks with me. I'm looking at the eBay listing prices on some of the Surging Sparks cards, and they are all incredibly expensive, and people are buying from them. So they have to be on this list. They belong on this list. And in 12th place, we got ourselves the Milotic EX from Surging Sparks, currently going for $500 in a PSA 10. $510 is what collector has listed, which is absolutely bonkers. $510 is insane. That is a huge chase card in any other category, right? This is a #1 S tier chase card from any set. And the Milotic EX isn't the only Surging Sparks card on the list. That's the really scary thing. Some people think Evolving Skies is the best modern Pokemon card set, but I think Surging Sparks is going to give Evolving Skies a run for its money. And that's not me talking, that's what the data is showing. So this is really eye-opening just seeing this list firsthand. In 11th place, we got ourselves another Paldean Fates card. So that's what I'm trying to say. Paldean Fates might be a little bit underrated based on the data. Mew EX from Paldean Fates, the ever popular Bubble Mew, it was going for $155 this year, and it's currently going for $600 in a PSA 10. That is a 287% price jump, quite aptly named Bubble Mew. It is literally the biggest bubble of this whole entire year. That doesn't mean it's going to pop, but it is by far the highest, fastest price jump we've seen on any set card out of this whole entire list. 287%, and there are 5,085 PSA 10 copies. If you've noticed, a lot of the cards that I've been listing off, there's usually 6,000 PSA 10 copies or more. And with the Mew EX having such a low population, like I said, when a card becomes incredibly popular, there just aren't enough graded copies on the market to meet demand, and they skyrocket. So definitely some cards that are a little bit underrated, like the Mew, skyrocketing. We got ourselves the Charizard EX from 151 in 10th place, making it onto the top 10. Normally people just do top 10 lists. I'm doing top 20, so we are now just making it onto the top 10, and we got ourselves the Charizard EX from 151, started off this year at $515, and it's currently going for $610, which is an 18% price jump, and there are 9,529 PSA 10 copies. A lot of people think this card is way more expensive than it is, but what they don't realize is that it started off in this year at being a very expensive card, and it actually saw a really big drop, and then it started climbing again at the end of Q3. So now it's pretty much back up to where it was at the start of this year. So there really hasn't been that huge jump year over year. It just dipped a lot and then went back to normal. So a lot of people think like the Charizard EX is way more expensive than it actually is. It just saw a huge swing, that's all. But if you picked it up at the start of this year at $500, you're still happy, but it's not nearly the same level of a price jump as some other cards. In 9th place, we got ourselves the Greninja EX from Twilight Masquerade, which started off this year. I say that because, I mean, it's only like a 6-month-old set, so whenever it was released, it was graded at $575, and it's currently going for $705, which is a 20% price jump, and there are 2,675 graded copies of the Greninja EX, which is one of the lower population report, but remember, the Greninja EX is significantly more new than other cards on this list. Some other cards on this list are from 3 to 4 years ago, so this card being only 6 months old, there's going to be a lot more graded PSA 10 copies. That doesn't mean it's going to dip in price, but just because it's new, the population report's going to reflect that. In 8th place, we got ourselves our fan favorite card, actually a really popular card. We got ourselves the Gengar VMAX from Fusion Strike. Started off this year at $360 and it's currently going for $680, which is an 89% price jump, 7,874 PSA 10 copy, a really, really solid card. And I'm happy to see this level of price jump for the Gengar VMAX. Now, my personal channel, we are not an investment channel. I'm just a collector and I talk about cards. We open packs, we do all kinds of stuff. My channel is not an investment channel, but as I say that, I can understand why there's such a large community of people that are constantly looking to invest in Pokemon cards. If you see some of these price jumps on these cards, 70%, 60%, 287%, like these are really crazy margins, and when cards are jumping that quickly in price, you're going to get a little bit of a mania. A lot of people are going to be excited to pick up this card. So you can see why the Pokemon investing community has kind of blown up. There's just so many Pokemon investing channels nowadays, and this is a huge part of it. In 7th place, we got ourselves another Evolving Skies card, and that is the Rayquaza VMAX. Starting off this year at $358, it's currently going for $755, which is a 111% price jump, and there are 9,131 PSA 10 copies of it. A really, really solid card. This card was already expensive at the start of this year, so the fact that it's now going for $700, the market has completely changed. People are willing to throw down much more money on cards than I ever expected. I never expected modern cards to reach this level where new cards are just coming out left, right, and center, and people are just willing to drop $500, $600 all over the place. So it is absolutely wild right now. In 6th place, we got ourselves our only regular illustration rare on the list. Can you guess what it is? It is the Magikarp from Paldea Evolved, the little carp that could. This card was going for $385 at the start of this year, which was already an insanely bonkers price for a illustration rare card, and is now currently going for $850 in a PSA 10, which is a 121% price jump, one of the largest price jump of this year. And the population report is the really scary thing. There are only 1,400 copies of it in a PSA 10, which means it has the lowest population report out of any card that has come out over the last couple of years. It is a hard card to get a PSA 10 copy of it. So when people want to brag to their friends and family that they have a PSA 10 Magikarp inside of their collection, they are paying a huge premium for it, because this card ungraded is not that expensive. You are paying a huge premium to get this card in a PSA 10. We are now moving on to the top 5 spots on this list, and this is going to get really, really wild. This is a little bit of the Wild Wild West, and you're going to see some shocking results on here. We are going to start off in 5th place with the Pikachu EX, the Gold Pikachu EX from Surging Sparks, which is currently going for $880 in a PSA 10 copy. This is a brand new card, so there's no population report, there's no change in data, but this is our first major expensive gold rare card. It's actually really insane. I do think it looks really good. It's a very good looking gold rare card. I was able to pull one for a viewer when Surging Sparks came out, and I think it's a super cool card. I think gold cards are underrated, so I really appreciate seeing some of them, like this Pikachu, getting some well-deserved love. In 4th place, we got ourselves the Giratina V from Lost Origin, one of the original Big Fives from the major alt art cards. This card was going for $580 in a PSA 10 copy at the start of this year. Now it's going for $985, which is a 70% price jump, and there are 5,800 PSA 10 copies of it. So it's got a pretty low PSA 10 population, all things considered, compared to some other graded cards. And I think it's well deserving of this spot. As long as you're looking at it from the modern art era, I think the Giratina V is definitely a heavy hitter, and it looks great inside of anyone's collection. So I'm not surprised about this one. This next one is going to be really shocking to you, because some people might think this is the most expensive modern chase card, and it might be currently dethroned. In third place, making it onto the podium, we have ourselves the Umbreon VMAX from Evolving Skies. This is shocking to me that it's not number one. The Umbreon VMAX from Evolving Skies is going for $760 at the start of this year, and it was on my overrated tier list of cards that I just thought were over expensive. Just because I think a card is overrated doesn't mean it's going to go down in price. As you guys can see, I think it's overrated because obviously it's very expensive. It is a very cool card, but now it's currently going for $1,800, which is a 137% price jump. One of the largest price jump we've ever seen, and it's for a very, very expensive card. People are still willing to drop a ton of money on this card, and there are 12,500 PSA 10 copies of. Sometimes when I say, oh, I think the Umbreon is very expensive, there's 12,000 copies of it, people in the comment usually like to say, well, Jake, there's maybe 12,000 copies of it, but there's 50,000 people that want this card, so the demand outweighs the supply. Obviously, the demand does outweigh the supply. The problem is, I don't like to throw out fake numbers around. It's really hard for me to say what the demand of a card is. It's just really hard, right? How do you know there's 50,000 people that want the Umbreon VMAX? You know, I'm not in the market of Pokemon card speculation. You know, I'll throw out numbers here and there where I'll say, like, oh, I think that card's overrated. I think that card's underrated. But I'm not going to say, oh, I think this card is going to go up. That card's going to go down. I try not to throw numbers like that around because that's when you get into really sketchy territory. And obviously, like I said, the demand for the Umbreon VMAX outstrips the supply, even at 12,500 copies, which is kind of bonkers. It's just a shocking time to be a Pokemon card collector. But how much demand there is for this card, it's hard to say. It's really, really hard to gauge demand. And it's constantly shifting and changing, you know. There could be 50,000 people that want the Umbreon VMAX right now, but in a year, that number could be 20,000 or it could be 100,000. We just don't know. So if you're collecting this card, you're willing to take that risk, that's going to be up to you. Moving on to our second place spot, we got ourselves the Latias EX from Surging Sparks. Now I said it's going to be a little bit controversial because this is a brand new card and there's not a ton of graded copies of it, but it still most likely will be in the top 3, and that's because it is currently selling for $2,000. Could it drop to $1,000? It could. It could drop to $1,000. Could it drop to $800? It could drop to $800. Even at $800, it would be easily in the top 5. So the Latias EX being in second place, I think that's completely fine for now. And the most expensive card from the modern era. In first place, we are talking about the Pikachu EX from Surging Sparks. Who saw this coming? The Pikachu EX is currently going for $2,120. It started off at $2,000. I think it's going to shift up and down a little bit, but it's still going to be a very expensive card. It will probably remain in the top 3 most expensive modern Pokemon cards for quite a while. I don't see this card ever dropping down to $500 for a PSA 10 copy. That would just be nuts. And I do think it's overrated. I don't think this card deserves to be $2,000. I think it's a cool card, but not $2,000 cool. But as you guys can see, how much does my opinion matter? I'm just a normal collector like everyone else. I don't know anything. But these numbers are really eye-opening for me. What I got out of this was that Surging Sparks is giving Evolving Skies a run for its money. If you look at the most expensive cards on the list, Surging Sparks is completely outbeating Evolving Skies in a lot of different categories. People are talking about the Moonbreon EX, but that Pikachu might be the next Moonkachu or something. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, because the modern era is completely shifting, and with Prismatic Evolution coming out next year, who knows? Perhaps the new Prismatic Evolutions Umbreon could be like a $3,000 cards. Cards are just going crazy right now. But this is a wild year. A list like this would have never occurred a year or two ago. So it's really crazy to see how quickly the market is shifting. And it's a wild time. So yeah, this has been the top 20 most expensive modern Pokemon cards right now that you could pull from any booster pack, really, because there's so many sets on this list. We got Brilliant Stars, Lost Origin, Fusion Strike, Silver Tempest, Obsidian, Flames, Paldean Fates, 151, Twilight Masquerade, Surging Sparks. All of these booster packs are available in tins, collection boxes right now at Walmart and Best Buy. So you could be cracking open booster packs and pull any of these cards. So wild time. Let me know what your thoughts are on this list. Thank you again to Collector for sharing this data. This data is not unique to me. Any of you can get this data from their social media platform or tracking it on the Collector app yourself. Thank you again to Collector. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for watching.